The history of Taiwan is a tale of remarkable cultural diversity, political evolution, and resilience. It begins over 6,000 years ago when Austronesian-speaking peoples, believed to be the ancestors of Taiwan's indigenous communities, settled on the island. These peoples developed unique languages, customs, and societies, and became the cultural forebears of the Austronesian peoples, who later spread across Southeast Asia, the Pacific, and even as far as Madagascar. For thousands of years, Taiwan remained relatively isolated, allowing these indigenous cultures to thrive in their own ways. However, sporadic contact with outsiders began to influence the island's history. In the 3rd century CE, Taiwan appeared in Chinese historical records as Yizhu, a land of tattooed people living in tribal societies. Despite this early reference, mainland China's interactions with Taiwan were limited for centuries, as the island lay on the fringes of Chinese influence. By the 10th century, Chinese fishermen and traders began to visit Taiwan's shores, and some small settlements were established. But the island remained largely autonomous and inhabited primarily by indigenous groups. It was not until the Age of Exploration in the 16th and 17th centuries that Taiwan became a contested space in the global arena. In the early 17th century, European colonial powers arrived in East Asia, eyeing Taiwan for its strategic location and resources. In 1624, the Dutch established a trading post in southern Taiwan, constructing Fort Zeelandia as their base near present-day Tainan. At the same time, the Spanish occupied northern Taiwan, building forts and settlements in what is now Keelung. The two European powers clashed over control of the island, but the Dutch ultimately ousted the Spanish in 1642 and consolidated their rule. Under the Dutch East India Company, Taiwan became a hub for trade, attracting Chinese migrants from Fujian and Guangdong provinces to work on the island as laborers and farmers. However, the Dutch control of Taiwan was short-lived. In 1661, Koxinga, a loyalist to the Ming Dynasty in China, fled to Taiwan after losing the mainland to the Ching Dynasty. Koxinga led a military campaign against the Dutch and successfully seized Fort Zeelandia in 1662, marking the end of Dutch rule. Koxinga established the Kingdom of Tungning, using Taiwan as a base to plan the reconquest of mainland China. Under his rule and that of his successors, Taiwan saw the expansion of Chinese settlement and agricultural development. However, this kingdom lasted only until 1683, when the Ching Dynasty defeated Koxinga's forces and annexed Taiwan, making it part of the Chinese Empire. During the Qing Dynasty's rule, Taiwan was initially considered a remote and unruly frontier. The Qing authorities encouraged migration from China's Fujian and Guangdong provinces, leading to increased tensions between the Chinese settlers and the indigenous peoples. Throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, Taiwan saw periodic uprisings, both from disgruntled settlers and indigenous groups resisting displacement. Despite these challenges, Taiwan's economy grew as it became a producer of rice, sugar, and tea for export. In the late 19th century, Taiwan's strategic importance drew the attention of foreign powers once again. In 1874, Japan launched a military expedition to Taiwan, ostensibly to punish indigenous peoples for attacking shipwrecked sailors. This marked Japan's growing interest in the island. Meanwhile, China attempted to strengthen its hold on Taiwan by upgrading it to a full province in 1887 and investing in infrastructure and defense. However, these efforts were insufficient to prevent Taiwan from falling into foreign hands again. In 1895, following China's defeat in the First Sino-Japanese War, the Qing government was forced to cede Taiwan to Japan under the Treaty of Shimonoseki. Japan's colonization of Taiwan marked a significant turning point in the island's history. Over the next 50 years, Japan transformed Taiwan into a modern colony, building railways, roads, schools, and public health systems. The Japanese sought to integrate Taiwan into their empire, imposing their language and culture while exploiting the island's resources. Despite these efforts, resistance to Japanese rule persisted, particularly in the early years, when armed uprisings by both indigenous peoples and Han Chinese settlers challenged Japanese authority. During World War II, Taiwan became a critical base for Japan's military operations in the Pacific. Many Taiwanese were conscripted into the Japanese army or forced to work in industries supporting the war effort. The war also brought devastation, with Allied forces bombing Taiwanese cities and infrastructure. In 1945, following Japan's defeat, Taiwan was handed over to the Republic of China, ROC, under the leadership of the Nationalist Party, Kuomintang, or KMT. The transition from Japanese to Chinese rule was far from smooth. The KMT's administration was marred by corruption, heavy-handed governance, and economic exploitation, leading to widespread discontent among the Taiwanese population. Tensions came to a head in 1947 during the February 28th incident, when a minor conflict escalated into a nationwide uprising against the KMT. The government responded with brutal repression, killing thousands in what became known as the White Terror. This period of authoritarian rule and political purges left deep scars on Taiwan's society. Meanwhile, on the mainland, the Chinese Civil War between the KMT and the Communist Party of China, CPC, reached its climax. In 1949, the CPC, led by Mao Zedong, defeated the KMT and established the People's Republic of China, PRC. The defeated nationalist government, under Chiang Kai-shek, fled to Taiwan, bringing with them millions of refugees and declaring Taipei the temporary capital of the Republic of China. For decades, the KMT maintained strict martial law in Taiwan, suppressing dissent and enforcing a one-party state. Despite its authoritarian politics, the KMT government presided over Taiwan's rapid economic development, transforming the island into one of the 4 Asian tigers. Through land reforms, industrialization, and export-oriented policies, Taiwan became a global leader in manufacturing and technology. By the 1980s, Taiwan had one of the highest standards of living in Asia, but demands for political freedom were growing. In the late 1980s, Taiwan began transitioning to democracy. Under Chiang Ching-kuo, Chiang Kai-shek's son, martial law was lifted in 1987, and opposition parties were legalized. In 1996, Taiwan held its first direct presidential election, a milestone in its democratization process. Since then, Taiwan has developed into a vibrant democracy with regular elections and peaceful transitions of power. Today, Taiwan is a global leader in technology, particularly in semiconductor manufacturing, and it boasts a thriving cultural scene that blends its indigenous, Chinese, and Japanese influences. However, Taiwan's status remains a point of contention. The PRC views Taiwan as a breakaway province and has vowed to reunify it with the mainland using force if necessary. Taiwan, on the other hand, operates as a de facto independent nation with its own government, military, and constitution. While some Taiwanese advocate for formal independence, others prefer maintaining the status quo to avoid provoking conflict with China. The story of Taiwan is one of resilience and adaptation, shaped by centuries of migration, colonization, war, and political evolution. From its indigenous roots to its modern status as a global economic and democratic powerhouse, Taiwan's history continues to unfold, shaped by the aspirations and challenges of its people.